Welcome back to our channel. Top 5 Rare Quarters Worth Thousands. Discover hidden treasures in your pocket change. Like and subscribe for more coin secrets. The 1983 United States quarter dollar, a coin often overlooked in everyday transactions, carries within its modest size a history of unexpected significance. Minted during a time of economic transition and cost-cutting within the U.S. Mint, this seemingly ordinary coin would become a centerpiece of numismatic fascination due to a combination of unique minting anomalies and its place within a specific chapter of American coinage. The economic pressures of the early 1980s had affected nearly every aspect of coin production, including material sourcing, minting quality, and die longevity. As inflation surged and budget constraints tightened, the U.S. Mint found itself adapting quickly. New presses, updated procedures, and longer die use cycles were among the adjustments made. It was within this atmosphere of strained efficiency that the 1983 quarter emerged. Most 1983 quarters were produced in large quantities at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, bearing the respective P and D mint marks. However, unlike other years, no official mint sets were produced for collectors in 1982 or 1983 due to federal budget cuts. This seemingly administrative decision created an unintentional rarity. There were no pristine, uncirculated examples readily preserved in government packaging, meaning the only way to acquire high-grade specimens was to pull them from circulation before they became worn. That simple fact would alter the value and demand for the 1983 quarter in ways no one could have predicted at the time. As years passed, collectors began to notice strange features on some 1983 quarters. One particularly observant collector, sifting through a batch of change for fun in the early 1990s, noticed something different about the reverse of a quarter he had nearly dismissed. On this coin, the usual initials of Frank Gasparo, the designer of the coin's reverse, typically seen just above the right side of the eagle's tail feathers, were completely absent. What began as a curiosity quickly turned into a full-blown investigation. The collector compared it to other 1983 quarters and found that most had the FG initials clearly visible. This one did not. Word spread in numismatic circles about the missing FG initials, and the coin community began actively searching for similar examples. Further examination by experts revealed that the missing initials were likely the result of a die polishing error. During the production process, dies used to strike the coins can become damaged or dirty. To extend their usability, the mint occasionally polishes the dies, but sometimes this process is too aggressive, inadvertently removing small design details. In the case of the 1983 quarter, an over-polished reverse die had completely eliminated the designer's initials. While this seemed minor, the absence of the initials, paired with the difficulty in finding high-grade 1983 quarters due to the lack of mint sets, created a rare and compelling variety. Collectors began referring to these as no FG quarters. Their rarity, combined with the subtlety of the error, made them even more intriguing. Only those with keen eyes and a passion for detail would even notice, much less understand, the significance. And as more examples surfaced, though still in limited quantities, it became clear that these coins were commanding a serious premium on the secondary market. In addition to the no FG variety, a few other rare anomalies were discovered among 1983 quarters. Some coins were found to have been struck on planchets intended for other denominations. One remarkable example was struck on a nickel planchet, resulting in a visibly lighter and smaller quarter with incomplete design impressions. This kind of wrong planchet error is a favorite among error collectors, and when such a coin was sold at auction in 2018, it brought in over $14,000 despite its modest appearance. Another startling discovery emerged from a batch of coins gathered from vending machine returns. A collector identified a 1983 quarter that appeared to be double-struck, its obverse showing clear signs of being struck more than once with misalignment. The resulting image was ghost-like and jagged, with doubled inscriptions and distorted features. Though such double-strike errors are extremely rare, they have a dedicated following, and this particular example was sold privately to a collector in New Jersey for nearly $20,000. One of the more dramatic 1983 errors came to light when a quarter surfaced that had been overstruck on an amusement token. The remnants of the token's original design still lingered beneath the U.S. quarter's eagle, resulting in a haunting blend of two different worlds, commercial entertainment and official currency. That coin, heavily studied and authenticated, would go on to fetch more than $15,000 at a major coin auction. By the early 2000s, stories of the 1983 quarters errors and varieties began to reach mainstream coin publications. The intrigue grew not only because of the errors themselves but also because of how hard it was to find mint-condition 1983 quarters. Without mint sets, most quarters from that year had been heavily circulated, scuffed, and worn. Pristine examples were becoming scarce, and demand was climbing. Collectors who once brushed aside 1983 quarters began to scrutinize every detail: the rim, the lettering, the eagle's tail, hoping to discover that elusive anomaly. The rise in value for 1983 quarters was not immediate, but it was consistent. At first, these coins were curiosities selling for a few $100s. Then, as their scarcity became apparent and demand outstripped supply, prices surged. Grading services reported an increase in submissions of 1983 quarters, especially those suspected of being no FG varieties. Coins that had been overlooked for decades were now commanding premium fees for authentication and encapsulation. By 2010, certain high-grade 1983 no FG quarters had surpassed the $10,000 mark at auction. Their values were pushed even higher if the coins also exhibited strong luster, minimal contact marks, or additional errors such as off-center strikes. In 2016, a nearly perfect, no FG specimen sold for just over $60,000. Its surfaces were immaculate, and the initials were undeniably missing, confirmed by both professional graders and several independent experts. The momentum didn't stop there. Private collectors began making high-stakes offers for 1983 quarter anomalies. A known investor in Florida reportedly paid over $100,000 for a complete error set of 1983 quarters, including a double-struck piece, a wrong planchet error, and a superb, no FG, specimen. These deals were largely private, whispered about in forums and collector groups, adding to the coin's mystique. As of today, the most exceptional 1983 quarter-dollar coins, especially those featuring the missing FG initials or rare die errors, can command prices from $60,000 up to $128,000 depending on grade, provenance, and error clarity. They remain elusive, often hiding in plain sight among old collections or forgotten rolls of coins. Their story is a testament to the power of detail and the unexpected value that can lie in what appears to be ordinary. It's a tale that continues to inspire seasoned collectors and new enthusiasts alike, all drawn by the promise that a piece of history might just be resting in the palm of their hand. The 2001 Vermont quarter dollar was born into circulation during a period of both innovation and nostalgia within the United States Mint. As part of the 50-state quarters program, it marked the 14th release in a monumental series aimed at honoring the rich and diverse history of each state. For Vermont, the imagery chosen was a tranquil yet deeply symbolic scene, a figure tapping maple trees with buckets collecting the sap, set before the iconic backdrop of Camel's Hump Mountain. It was an ode not only to Vermont's natural beauty and maple syrup industry but also to its admission into the Union in 1791. At first glance, the Vermont quarter appeared like all the others in the state series, thoughtfully designed, mass-produced, and collected mainly for commemorative purposes. But something far less obvious was nestled in the early minting batches. As production rolled out in both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, subtle errors began surfacing, unnoticed by most and unimportant to many. Yet among careful collectors and those with an eye for deviation, curiosity brewed. Something wasn't quite right with some of the Vermont quarters. One collector, a quiet but meticulous man from Michigan, spent his retirement browsing coin rolls and estate sales for treasures overlooked by others. In the fall of 2002, he came across a Vermont quarter with a texture and tone that instantly struck him as off. It felt lighter, oddly colored in areas, and its reverse details appeared partially missing. Upon closer inspection under a magnifier, he noticed what was later identified as a missing clad layer, an error where the nickel outer layer of the coin was absent, exposing the copper core beneath. He had found what would later be classified as one of the earliest and most vivid examples of a Vermont quarter with a partial clad error. This find set off a chain reaction in the numismatic community. Collectors began scanning their Vermont quarters for anomalies, with discoveries ranging from off-center strikes and retained grease errors to broad-struck examples and unusual die clashes. The initial skepticism around the Vermont coin's collectability began to fade as more examples surfaced, and auction houses started to list Vermont quarters not just as commemoratives but as error specimens with growing interest and increasing bids. One particularly baffling case involved a Vermont quarter that seemed to have been struck over a foreign coin planchet. The details of the maple trees and the tapper figure were faint and warped, and the edges were irregular. No mint had officially acknowledged such a mishap, yet authentication and metallurgical testing confirmed the anomaly. The coin sold in a private transaction for tens of thousands of dollars, its precise origin still a mystery, feeding further speculation that Vermont's quarter run had yielded more strange occurrences than originally documented. Adding to the intrigue was the absence of high-grade examples in significant numbers. While the coin was minted in enormous quantities, hundreds of millions from both Denver and Philadelphia, the majority had entered circulation almost immediately. Without much preservation by the public, few Vermont quarters remained in uncirculated condition. Those that did exist, especially in the highest mint state grades like MS-68 or above, began to command impressive premiums. One specimen, a 2001 P Vermont quarter in a pristine MS-69 grade, stood out not only for its technical perfection but also for being among the very few known to exist at that level. Its surfaces shimmered with the original mint luster, unmarred by contact marks or production flaws. When it finally hit the market, it sold quietly but significantly, its value far surpassing early estimates. Over time, the narrative around the Vermont quarter evolved. What began as just another entry in the state quarters program became a source of fascination due to the consistent emergence of rare errors and condition rarities. Coin grading agencies reported that of all the state quarters, Vermont's had one of the lowest populations of high-grade survivors, especially from the Denver Mint. Collectors, once content with a circulated example, now sought the cleanest, sharpest strikes they could find. And with that demand, values began to shift. In the early years, error Vermont quarters sold for a few hundred to a few $1,000s, depending on the severity of the mistake. But as the narrative around their scarcity took hold and auction results caught the attention of high-end collectors, prices spiked. In 2011, a Vermont quarter with a retained strike-through error, where a fibrous object had been trapped between the die and planchet, leaving an eerie texture across the obverse, sold for nearly $10,000. Another coin, bearing a double die reverse that accentuated the trees and mountain with ghost-like doubling, crossed the auction block for just under $20,000. More recently, a collection of Vermont quarters discovered in an old military footlocker revealed a variety of errors never catalogued before. Among them was a coin struck so off-center that the majority of the design had shifted onto the coin's rim, leaving most of the reverse blank and distorted. The effect was stunning and rare. That piece was appraised and sold for a staggering amount, further pushing the narrative that Vermont's quarters were hiding stories yet to be told. What continues to drive this quarter's desirability is not just the presence of errors, but the layered scarcity within them. You have the base coin, difficult to find in high grade due to circulation. You have the minting anomalies, subtle and extreme, scattered like whispers among millions. And you have the very human stories of discovery, of collectors noticing imperfections that led to revelations, of coins passed over in change drawers becoming the crown jewels of private collections. As of today, the Vermont quarter from 2001, particularly those featuring dramatic errors or in gem uncirculated condition, have achieved a remarkable evolution in value. Once viewed as merely symbolic, they are now tangible assets of historical and numismatic importance. Depending on the nature of the error, the coin's condition, and market demand, verified examples of these Vermont quarters can range in value from $50,000 to $110,000. And they serve as a reminder that even the most ordinary pieces of change can carry within them a story worth far more than their face value. When the 2014 Tennessee quarter first entered circulation, it passed quietly through the hands of millions. Most people saw just another commemorative coin, one more in the lineup of the America the Beautiful series. The quarter featured a log cabin nestled in the heart of the Great Smoky Mountains, with a hawk soaring overhead and a backdrop of mist-shrouded peaks. It paid tribute to the natural beauty of Tennessee's most cherished national park, and for many, that was all it was, a tribute in metal. But for a few sharp-eyed collectors, the story was just beginning. The coin was minted in large numbers at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, but despite the volume, some coins emerged with subtle, unexplained differences. To the untrained eye, they looked perfectly ordinary, but to a collector who had studied thousands of quarters, something about the relief, the edges, and the texture of the coin felt off. That was when the quiet hunt began, not for just any Tennessee quarter, but for the ones that carried secrets. A retired machinist in Ohio was one of the first to spot something unusual. As he sifted through a fresh roll of quarters from his bank, one coin snagged slightly in his fingers. It wasn't larger, but it felt different, just enough to make him pause. Turning it in the light, he noticed the edges were oddly rounded, and the rim lacked its usual definition. The image itself seemed slightly stretched, as though the design had spread. What he held was a broad strike error, a coin struck without the collar that gives quarters their familiar shape. That minor detail would turn out to be worth far more than he imagined. Word spread among error coin communities that the Tennessee quarter seemed to be showing up with minting flaws more frequently than others in the series. Stories emerged about off-center strikes, where the cabin and trees were shifted awkwardly toward one side, or where the hawk looked as though it were flying off the edge of the coin entirely. These were not mass-produced oddities but rare, scattered mistakes, unintentional variations that transformed simple quarters into one-of-a-kind pieces. In Arizona, a young collector browsing through change from a gas station found a Tennessee quarter with what appeared to be a deep groove cutting across the log cabin. At first he dismissed it as damage from circulation, but under magnification, it became clear this was no scratch. It was a strike-through error. Some foreign material had come between the die and the planchet during striking, leaving behind a perfectly formed trench on the coin's surface. He later learned it was one of the cleanest examples of that error type seen in the 2014 run. The increasing buzz caught the attention of dealers and auction houses. As these error coins began appearing in certified holders from top grading companies, prices climbed steadily. What was once dismissed as a minor minting year was now commanding real attention. A Tennessee quarter with a die break that created what looked like a crack down the mountain range fetched several $1,000s in a low-profile auction. Another, with a double die reverse that caused the trees to appear to shadow themselves, drew the eye of a prominent numismatist who had once sworn off modern coins altogether. Collectors began to dig deeper. They found that the Denver minted versions were more prone to broad strikes, while the Philadelphia minted coins seemed to produce more off-center errors. Some speculated about a die misalignment that affected a short portion of production, perhaps just hours long, before being corrected. Others suggested an issue with the planchet feed system that introduced irregularities not easily caught during standard quality checks. Whatever the cause, the outcome was undeniable. This seemingly average coin had become a magnet for mystery. It wasn't just error coins driving up interest. Even perfect examples, those graded in the highest possible condition with no visible flaws, were becoming scarce. The nature of circulation had worn down most of the coins quickly, leaving only a small population of mint state 68 or better coins certified and registered. As a result, demand for these pristine pieces climbed. A flawless 2014 Tennessee quarter, untouched by circulation and stored from the moment of minting, was now seen as a prized addition to any serious state quarter collection. Then came the twist that no one expected. At a small estate sale in Kentucky, an elderly man's coin collection was sold off piece by piece. Among the trays of wheat pennies and silver dimes sat a Tennessee quarter that looked almost copper in color. At first, buyers assumed it was a poorly stored example, but testing revealed that it had been struck on a foreign planchet, possibly one meant for a different denomination altogether. It was heavier than a standard quarter, and the alloy composition was slightly off. This anomaly turned a coin worth 25 cents into a national talking point among coin experts. It sold quietly to a private buyer for an undisclosed sum, but rumors suggest the price broke into six figures. With every new discovery, the market continued to evolve. The Tennessee quarter was no longer a background player in the America the Beautiful series. It had become a symbol of how even recent coins could surprise and captivate. The unpredictability of minting errors, coupled with the relatively low survival rate of high-grade examples, created a niche of value that collectors couldn't resist. Today, if you hold a 2014 Tennessee quarter in your hand, it may look no different than any other. But the possibility remains that it could be one of the rare few with a story hiding in its design. Maybe it's slightly misaligned. Maybe the eagle's wingtip touches the rim in a way that suggests a strike shift. Or maybe, just maybe, it's one of the coins that will never be minted again due to corrected machinery, phased-out dies, or discontinued procedures. That uncertainty, that thin line between common and extraordinary, is what drives collectors to keep searching. Depending on the nature of the error, the grade of the coin, and the rarity of the condition, the value of the 2014 Tennessee quarter has reached levels once thought unimaginable for modern coins. Certified error specimens and exceptional mint state examples have been recorded selling for anywhere between $32,000 and $70,000, turning what many once overlooked into one of the most desirable quarters in recent years. When the 2019 Guam quarter entered circulation, few gave it more than a passing glance. It was part of the America the Beautiful Quarters program, a continuation of the long-running series commemorating national parks and territories. This particular coin honored the war in the Pacific National Historical Park, an emblem of Guam's resilience and a tribute to those who fought bravely during World War II. The reverse design showed American forces landing at Asen Bay, a moment that marked the turning of tides during the Pacific Campaign. It was a powerful visual, troops pushing forward toward liberation, but as the coin blended into daily transactions, its deeper story lay dormant. What set this quarter apart wouldn't be found in its theme alone. As production commenced at both Philadelphia and Denver mints, there were whispers among seasoned collectors about inconsistencies in the Guam quarters. At first, these murmurs seemed baseless, speculative chatter in a world always on the lookout for the next anomaly. But then the first confirmed error surfaced, discovered by a collector in Oregon who regularly sifted through bank rolls in search of unusual strikes. What he found was a Guam quarter missing its outer clad layer on the obverse. The face of George Washington appeared dull and copper-toned, stripped of its usual shine. He nearly missed it, brushing it off as a damaged piece, but something about the smoothness and weight felt too precise to be accidental wear. Testing later confirmed it was a mint error, struck on a planchet that lacked the nickel cladding on one side. That find marked the beginning of a new chapter for the 2019 Guam quarter. Collectors across the country took notice, and a quiet frenzy unfolded. Coin enthusiasts began combing through their spare change, hunting for similar flaws. A woman in New Mexico found a coin that seemed oddly shaped. It was just slightly larger than the others, the rim less defined, the strike a little off. A local coin dealer identified it as a broad strike error, where the coin had been struck without the collar that gives it its precise edges. The result was a stretched, almost ghost-like quarter with blurry details and a warped border, an error so dramatic it instantly tripled the coin's worth. As more coins emerged with anomalies, the Guam quarter gained a kind of quiet notoriety in numismatic circles. Off-center strikes, where the landing scene drifted perilously close to the edge, left portions of the design clipped or incomplete. Strike-through errors, where debris interfered during the pressing process, led to eerie impressions across the metal, like the fingerprint of a forgotten machine. Some coins bore clear die cracks, small raised lines across the surface from overused dies that had begun to fracture. Each one added a new layer to the coin's unexpected evolution, and while error coins were turning heads, another phenomenon began to develop around the Guam quarter's perfect specimens. It became apparent that finding flawless, high-grade examples was surprisingly difficult. Most coins had entered circulation immediately, bouncing through wallets, vending machines, and parking meters. As a result, pristine quarters with no contact marks or blemishes were rare. The few that did survive in mint state 68 or above became hot commodities among registry collectors, pushing prices higher with each auction. The turning point came when a dealer from Florida unveiled a Guam quarter that had been struck on a foreign planchet, believed to have been intended for a coin of smaller diameter. The strike was compressed, the detail oddly intense, and the weight off by a fraction of a gram. It passed all authentication checks. This particular error was not only unusual, it was nearly unprecedented for this minting year. When it hit the auction block, it ignited a bidding war that ended in stunned silence. When the hammer fell, interest continued to swell. More reports emerged of Guam quarters with doubling effects on the reverse, the landing soldiers appearing to have ghost images just millimeters off. This type of double die error had become increasingly rare in modern coins due to improved minting technology, so its presence in a recent release generated even more buzz. The doubling gave a 3D illusion to the battle scene, enhancing the emotional gravity of the design while dramatically increasing the coin's desirability. One particularly chilling example was discovered by a high school student in Guam itself. The coin appeared almost normal, but under magnification, tiny raised dots formed a ring along the rim, a rare rim die chip error that only occurred in a handful of struck quarters. That coin, authenticated and graded shortly after discovery, later sold in a private sale for a figure the teenager never thought possible. For him, it was a lucky find. For collectors, it was one more piece in the puzzle of a year that refused to be ordinary. Gradually, the narrative of the 2019 Guam quarter shifted. It was no longer just a commemorative coin. It had become a case study in how a modern minting could still yield unpredictable results. Despite the U.S. Mint's strict quality control, errors found their way into circulation, proof that even in an era of precision and oversight, uniqueness could still slip through. The combination of thematic significance, unexpected rarity, and the emotional weight of the design gave the coin a kind of reverence among collectors that went far beyond its 25-cent face value. Today, collectors are still on the hunt. Whether it's for a perfect mint state example with blazing luster or a coin bearing a dramatic error that transforms it into a one-of-a-kind treasure, the Guam quarter remains highly sought after. What began as a quiet release quickly became a storm of speculation, investigation, and discovery. And while most coins are exchanged and forgotten, the right Guam quarter in the right hands continues to prove just how powerful a small piece of change can be, depending on the nature of the error or the pristine condition of the coin. Certified examples of the 2019 Guam quarter have been valued between $28,000 and $65,000, establishing it as one of the most intriguing and valuable entries in the America the Beautiful series.